Hello and welcome to another episode of My Pocket Psych, where we're doing something slightly different this time. It's the first in a series where we're going to spend some time meeting the wider team. And today I'm delighted to be joined by a friend of the podcast, Dr. Rachael Skews. Rachael, how are you doing today?
I'm good. And thank you for inviting me on. It's great fun to have some opportunities to chat as per usual.
Chat and see each other. I love doing videos because you can actually see what's going on the other end and not just listen to it. So we'll have some podcast listeners, and then we'll also have some people watching the video as well. But the reason I'm doing this is so that people who are vaguely interested in learning more about work-life psych and are working with us or want to work with us can understand more about the people they'll be doing the work with. So, on websites, they always have that team page, and you always have a lovely headshot and then some qualifications. I want to get beyond that and help people understand who we actually are. So, Rachael, thank you. And let me dive in with the first question. You're a coaching psychologist like me. What prompted you to become a coaching psychologist?
It's such a good question. I think I had a slightly convoluted route into where I am now. I get that feedback from people that I've not had a traditional career journey. But I think that's really good because I like challenging the idea of this traditional career journey. Like, you've got to know when you're a little kid in school, what is it that I want to be when I grow up?
And you didn't know that you wanted to be a coaching psychologist when you were 5?
No, there's no little, picture books that have got coaching psychologists in them. But I'll tell you a little bit about how I got here. So my first degree is in philosophy, which is wonderful, but it's not very vocational in its training. And so I left that degree and essentially ended up doing an admin job in a consultancy, in a business consultancy, which wasn't coaching, but it was more therapy. It was an EAP, Employee Assistance Program. So it was supporting people in the workplace who had often a traumatic incident at work, or they were experiencing something very stressful, and so they could get support. And to be honest, Richard, that was when I decided not to go into clinical psychology. So it is very relevant because what I was always interested in was people. I was always interested in helping people to become, I think it sounds a bit trite, but become their best selves. There's something just really powerful about working with people, partnering with them to achieve more, to be able to do more. So I think for me, the clinical work, I saw it firsthand. There was a whole team of counsellors and psychologists that I worked quite closely with. And I thought, I don't think that's the area that I want to go into. I was very attracted to sports psychology.
Interesting.
And
You've never told me that before.
now I really, really thought about retraining in sports psychology. And the reason that I didn't is that, in my opinion, there was so much more that you could do by working with people in other contexts like business, which was the main area that I work in. I know that's what we work together on. But I'm so glad that I didn't specialize in sports psychology, because I think the coaching work that I do now is so broad in its application. You can work with pretty much anybody in any context. And the work that I've done in my career has spanned pure performance and leadership coaching, to working in technology, to working with people on their health conditions. And what I've started to realize is how incredibly linked all of these things are: our well-being and our physical health and our, emotional health and our, I'm really into the biopsychosocial model of understanding people.
Yeah. It's really useful to understand how those things link and how improving one area can spill over into improvements elsewhere. And we are
Absolutely.
one person, so we can't
Yeah.
split ourselves up.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think sometimes when we're thinking about business and we're thinking about performance or we're thinking about leadership, we try to take that wider context, the social context, the personal context out of it.
So what is it you
So
most enjoy about working in coaching contexts?
I really like the challenge. I've always had a very strong value around challenge, and I like being able to have conversations with people where we are exploring their challenges. But a lot of the time, it's where there's a misalignment. Something's not quite right, or people are feeling a little bit stuck, or they are taking on something that feels really big, or they've got big decisions to make. That's the other one. I work quite a lot with
Yeah.
people for whom their career is in a position, or they've got opportunities and they're not sure whether or not, or how to move forward. And so we tend, in my experience as coaching psychologists, to really offer a lot of value in those kinds of situations where, being able to overcome in some way, shape, or form is kind of part of the challenge that somebody's taking on.
And it's not always about a specific problem, but maybe a period in someone's life, a juncture, a decision, an adaptation. But there's some inference of change and growth there, isn't there, regardless of the context?
Definitely. Yeah, and it's really interesting. I've been thinking when I did my PhD, which was in coaching psychology, I was looking at the different levels that coaching can work at, and sometimes it's very specific and kind of, really focused on just improving your skills, or, really targeted. But then sometimes it can be at this much deeper level, which is very transformational for people. And I think it's nice. And if I work with people, I imagine you're the same. There's a little bit of contracting around that, because you don't really know when you go into that first call with somebody, or that first conversation, where they might want to go. And I'm very happy to follow them. We can keep it on whatever level they feel is right for them or works best for them. But I really love the fact that as a coaching psychologist, the skill set that I have, I can work at all of those different levels.
And they're the levels. Are there any coaching topics you particularly enjoy working on?
I love doing values work. I've just got so into this as a coach. And as you know, and I think if other people have heard me on the podcast before, I do acceptance and commitment coaching. That's what my research was in. And that's the main approach that I use. I use others as well, the CBT and person-centered approaches. But most of the time, I'm using people's values as an anchor. And by values, all I mean is the things that bring meaning or purpose, or that sense of vitality. I often say to people, like, it's the reason that you get up in the morning. Why do you do this job instead of something else? Kind of the questions that you're asking me. Why coaching?
You've
Why do
noticed.
this work? And honestly, as my career has matured and I've started doing this work, which, as I said, for me, it's really working with people, helping people to grow and transform and reach goals and have moments of insight, and that for me that's why I do it. I love that. I absolutely love it. I love the problem solving. I love the challenge aspect of it. I love working with people and seeing them kind of achieve things. And I'll get into that really early on. So I'll say to people within the first 10 minutes or so, tell me a little bit about what brings that meaning and purpose to you, or that sense of vitality, and really focusing it depends on the context of the coaching. If I'm doing leadership coaching, it might be more about the work domain. Tell me about what it is about this work or your team or the context that you're in. Like, what is it that's really brings you to life that you love doing? What's the stuff, say it quietly, that you would do even if you weren't getting paid? Being able to explore that first, I think, really helps people to, if they've not already got a really clear sense of that, to create that clear sense. And then that anchors the rest of the work, because you can see it's not that every action will drive them towards that necessarily, because life's more complicated, but it's that everything can be seen in the context of, is it moving you towards that? Is it preventing you from moving towards that? How is this in relation to those values that you hold, the things that are really important to you, that give you that sense of meaning and purpose in your life? So being able to look at the dynamic of that is where I do a lot of work to say, and it isn't as simple as everything you do has got to be moving you towards them. Wouldn't that be lovely? But it's more, there are constraints on you and you're making choices. And so how is it that you want to move forward? What is it that you want to achieve in this situation?
Given the context you're in, given the life and all the stuff that brings with it, rather than a textbook, answer, or a perfect, whatever that is, answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, sometimes it is that simple. I have had coaching experiences where doing that work up front has just really clarified where somebody's at, or a decision that they need to make, and they're like, oh no, I can see this differently now. But most of the time that's just the beginning, and then you're working with somebody as things unfold and develop, and thinking about it in relation to that. Also, so much work that I do with people to really get them to, the way I would describe it is like self-care a little bit better. We're really hard on ourselves. I often say to people, part of what I'll do in the coaching sessions is offer a little bit of compassion. A lot of the time, we are able to be compassionate to other people in a way that we just find it much more challenging to give that to ourselves.
The nice thing about that, though, is that it's a skill, and we can develop it once we know it's a thing that can be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think once you normalize it as well, so within the coaching sessions that I have with people, I'll kind of call it out and say, look, I'm hearing you be really hard on yourself. And I just want to take a moment and for us to notice that it doesn't necessarily improve our performance. That's what I've realized through the research that I've done, the work that I've done, reading other people's work, which is, such a huge input into us as coaching psychologists. Actually, just beasting yourself all of the time, that is not where really strong performance comes from.
And the thing that you and I share, therefore, is that while we might do that to ourselves, we also know there's an alternative, and we know how to do it. So, we have that advantage. But I think it's a really important point. This isn't about being perfect as a coaching psychologist. Previously on the podcast, we answered the really difficult question posed to me: do you practice what you preach? And we'll unpack that, in over a drink sometime. But you don't need to be a perfect human to do this work, but you need to be aware and focused on the other person. And what you've said is, what's really important here is values and compassion, two really great tools in the toolkit to help someone get where they want to be. When you're not doing that, when you're not coaching, when you're not being a psychologist, what do you love to do?
Oh, I love gardening. I'm so into the garden at the minute. We bought a new house a couple of years ago, and we're in the process of like a big, large-scale renovation, which, again, I love a challenge. So this is the theme throughout my entire life. I love a challenge. And this is my biggest challenge I've taken on so far. But that creativity, gardening is like design in 4D. So you've got to create like a canvas. It takes a year to see whether or not what you've done has worked.
Of course, yeah. Time plays a big role here. Yeah.
Yeah, but you get so much pleasure from it as well. And it's like magic. What I'm trying to do, because I have a really strong value about the environment as well, is create a garden where it's got that lower energy impact, low carbon impact. And so part of that is getting the composting right.
So you love learning as well.
Oh my God, yes. Yes, and I'm not doing any more degrees.
This is on the record now, so we shall see in the coming years. I'll remind you of this.
Yeah, well, I do loads of CPD. I love learning that way, but learning about our home, learning about fabric first in terms of renovations, and how do we get a low energy home, have as productive but beautiful garden as we can have.
Is there one thing you could share that you wish more people understood about coaching?
I mean, there's a lot. I think being able to understand the differences between really solid, really well evidenced things in coaching versus things that aren't. And, I think I've been on this podcast before talking about how important evidence-based practice is in general, and all evidence-based practices. Are we using tools and techniques and interventions that are safe, that have been shown to be effective? Or is it something where, okay, you're having a lovely chat with someone, but it's not actually creating any change? Or even worse, could in fact be making things worse in the hands of somebody who's hasn't got the right training or background. One of the things that I notice is that I meet a lot of coaches from all sorts of different backgrounds. And of course, you can have really effective coaches who aren't psychologists. So it's not a necessary and sufficient condition. But I think what psychologists do is they come to it with an understanding of science and an understanding of what coaching is, because it is an intervention by design. You are doing something to another person.
Absolutely. So we know what
Yeah.
works, we know how it works, and we know for whom it works, and we use that to decide what the work looks like rather than what we've always done or what's popular and all that stuff.
But then the flip side of that is really good coaching is also very client led. So part of the skill of a coach is not, I'm going to apply this intervention by rote. It's way more that you understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you can do that with a coachee. So it's very creative and it's more of an art. It's that beautiful combination of art and science, in my opinion. That might be why I love it so much.
There's the philosophy coming back.
It's always just bubbling under the surface.
Well, look, I mentioned those online team pages. I will put a link to Rachel's profile in the notes so people can learn a little bit more. And sure, if they've got questions for you, they will drop them through. You can email us podcast@worklifepsych.com. But for now, Rachael, thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about you and what you do and why you do it. It's been great. So, and I've learned something. I had no idea about that sports psychology thing. So there you go.
Yeah.
But for now, thank you so much, Rachael. Look forward to our next chat.